Tonight, how exciting is this? I want to talk about Stromberg carburetors. Now, we don't have anywhere near the number of people on tonight that we did last session 2 weeks ago. At the peak, we had 217 people, but apparently the Stromberg carburetor is not as exciting. But if I'm going to talk about SUs, I got to talk about Strombergs. So here's the Stromberg 175 CD that's used on the late model MGB, on the American spec and Canadian spec cars, maybe other places too, I don't know, certainly not on the home models. They were using HIFs. And this is a constant depression carburetor. It says right on the top of it, 175 CD, constant depression. If you work with these enough, you'll get depressed. That's just a joke. Anyway, it works just the same way as an SU. It has an air piston inside that goes up and down on the inside. The faster you go, the higher the piston moves. And the higher the piston moves, the farther it pulls this needle up out of a fixed jet. And that controls the rate of gasoline getting mixed with the air. But there's some different things on this than an SU. So let's just take a look and see what some of them are. First of all, instead of having a nice fine machined surface between the air piston and the suction chamber, we have a diaphragm. So this black rubber diaphragm. As it turns out, even though Cecilia from Scarborough Fair is not an MGB person, she sells MGA parts. I did hear from her that in an emergency, you can use a plastic, like not nylon, what are those gloves? Latex. You can use a glove and just jam it in here and put it underneath the cover and use it temporarily if this diaphragm perforates. That's one of the problems with this carburetor. If this diaphragm perforates, then the suction on top isn't enough to pull the piston up. The piston sits too low, and so the car runs really rich. And let me tell you, I mean, you can buy a lot of stuff at Napa. You can buy a 6014 bulb. You can buy an 1158 bulb. You can buy all kinds of stuff at Napa. You can't buy this diaphragm. So if you have a Stromberg carburetor, carry an extra diaphragm. Get a couple of them and just put them in the glove box for that day that you're going to need it, because all of a sudden it's like you can't move the car. Well, that was until I found out that you could use these nitrile or latex gloves, but that's only a real quick fix. Now on the back side of this air piston are two holes, and those holes that you can see up here at 11 and 1 o'clock are the air holes that go on the lee side of the air. So the air is going through the carburetor, and it's picking up the vacuum on the backside and causing the air piston to lift. Those have to be in the correct location. They can't be rotated on the side or at the front. So to make sure that that's correct, there's a little tag. I don't know if you can see this little tag on the rubber diaphragm that has a complementary tag on the inside diameter. And so when you put this rubber diaphragm onto the air piston, you put it in with the one tag on the inside and the one tag on the outside, and that will align it so the two air holes are next to the engine, and the carburetor works correctly. We've got some other interesting things here. We've got the dashpot up here on top. This is the same as on an SU. Whoops, it's not. This one's broken. It's missing bits and pieces. Anyway, it enriches, allows the mixture to enrich at idle. And so down into the dashpot, you want to use heavy oil, especially on the Stromberg. Especially, we'll get around to that in a minute. So on the inside here, we have a jet that's down on the right in the very middle. You can see that right down there in the center, and that's a 100 thousandths jet. Now the jet wears after a while and becomes a little tiny bit oblong. You can get a new needle, that helps. But if you want to resize the jet in place, you have to take the float bowl cover off and then put the bottom of the jet against your vise, put a small little tiny ball bearing in on top of that jet, take a punch, put it down in here, crack that punch and also the ball, and it takes the hole up on top of the jet and makes it smaller. It crushes it in. Then follow that through with a number 39 drill. 39. The 39 drill is 0.00995 in diameter. So it's half a thousandth less than 100 thousandths. So that can restore your jet back to an correct operating diameter. So I said the needle can go bad too. You can buy a new needle. Most of them take a 40 MGBs, take a 45H needle. You can buy that right out of the catalog. This is an interesting needle because this one failed. This is very unusual, but this needle popped out of the barrel. You see the top of the thing just popped out. So instead of the needle being held down in place, it's hopped up. Well, no amount of adjusting can make this thing run lean enough. So we used to take, there's a little nip on the side of there that holds the needle in place. And we used to drill that, put a little pin like a bit out of a paper clip through there just to hold the needle down, or you can buy a brand new needle. There's a CO adjustment on the side here, carbon monoxide. So if your car's getting smogged, then this is really important. But if your car is not getting smogged, meaning not being checked for carbon monoxide and all that kind of stuff, you crank down the 5/8, and then you crank down the brass here, so it just shuts it off. So it doesn't work at all. On the throttle disc is an overrun valve. You can see the spring-loaded valve on the throttle disc. That's all SUs and Strombergs from 1968 through 1980. The smaller Strombergs have a different overrun valve. But the spring-loaded valve, and you can see this one's been soldered shut on the spring-loaded side, so that when you snap the thing shut, the car slows down right away. There are two adjusters on the side. There's the fast idle screw right out here. That's the fast idle screw, and then the normal idle screw is up here. But once you get the normal idle set, you make all future settings off the fast idle screw. What else can I show you here? There's a vent for the float bowl. And if there's any drag at all coming from the charcoal canisters, this car will not operate correctly. I just had a guy call me and we went through all this stuff. And I said, well, remember, always do the cheapest, easiest, simplest stuff first. And so he disconnected the line that went from there over to the charcoal canister, and instantly it ran better. Problem with the canisters. So later on, he took the canisters apart and cleaned out the charcoal. And there's just a plug in there somehow or other. There's a vacuum being created. As such, it put a vacuum on top of the gasoline in the float bowl, and he couldn't get the mixture rich enough. It was running too lean. What more is there to talk about on this guy? That's about it. The air piston has a spring, just like an SU does. The real early SUs don't. They got real heavy pistons, but it was cheaper to make a spring and put that on top of the piston than to make the piston heavy to get the downward force. Then we have the automatic choke. So the automatic choke has got a plunger. on the needle on the inside that runs the length of here, and connects to 2 ports on the back, and allows gasoline to get through this choke and into the airflow. Not unlike an HIF carburetor, not like an H or HS where you physically drop the jet, but it's a rotary valve, and it's controlled by a heat mass. I've got a bunch of videos up about this, but here's the heat mass, and as you warm it up, the bimetal strip winds up, and eventually sets this little lever that I got my finger on here, positions this lever all the way off so that there's no more extra gasoline getting mixed with the carburetor. Usually the problem is that the car runs rich. That's the usual problem. There are a couple of different circumstances where the car can run lean and you're going, I can't get this thing rich enough. What's going on here? Well, if it's running too lean, again, disconnect the vent that goes to the charcoal canister, leave this open to the air. So you've got atmospheric pressure that's pushing on the gasoline. There was something else, but I got brain fade here, so I can't think of why else it would run lean. Well, your float height, when you have the float bowl off on the bottom and you're looking at the float itself from the side, there's a distance that the workshop manual gives you, 5/8 or 11/16. Of course, it's converted into metric. But if you just look at the casting line on the float itself, just the casting line, and make sure it's parallel with the bottom of the carburetor, not down, not up, but just the casting line in the plastic float, parallel with the bottom of the carburetor, you'll be okay. If the carburetor is running too rich and you're going, oh, geez, I don't know, is it the choke or is it the carburetor that's causing it to run rich? Drop the choke away. Just take the 3 screws here in the bottom that hold that choke tight against the carburetor, and just drop it away, and then decide, is it running correctly now, or can you tune it now if you fiddle with the adjuster tool down the center of the air piston. And if you can get it to run properly with the choke dangling, but then as soon as you put it back on, it starts to run too rich, well, duh, it's the choke that's causing the problem. And again, I've got a bunch of videos up, but the Stromberg carburetor is a triumph. The story is that Triumph decided that they were getting hosed by BMC to buy SUs because the TR3s had long body SU carburetors on them. Jags have SUs and so forth. But later on, especially after the company combined, then Triumph gained ascendancy and decided that they were going to sell the single carburetor. And it's easier to adjust one carburetor on a car coming to the United States and guarantee that it's going to stay in tune than 2 carburetors, which were on the home models, I believe, right through the very end of production. I've got one, I had a box here. I don't know what I did with the box. I was going to show you the O-ring that was on the inside. It's the tiniest O-ring. I didn't peel it off the box. Darn it. It's a tiny little, I mean, the tiniest circle you can make with a pencil and still see a circle is as small as that O-ring is, that goes on the brass needle that goes down inside the valving here. So anyway, I got lots of videos up about this carburetor, and it will not run without the air cleaner on it. You've got to have, especially the factory air cleaner. For whatever reason, it just ends up running too lean. So I've made lots of people happy when they call me and say, I can't get the car to run over 3,500 RPM. It just flattens out. It won't go anywhere. Can't figure it out. I've tried 100 things. I said, do you have the air cleaner on? They go, well, no. And I said, well, put the air cleaner on. And then some of them call me back and say, thank you very much. My best one was a guy in Texas who called me, and this is, oh my gosh, this is years and years ago. And I said, well, put the air, you got the air cleaner on? He goes, no. And I said, well, put it on. He calls me right back. I mean, within 15 minutes, he goes, oh, it runs so great now, you know, yada, yada. And he says, what I owe you? And I said, where are you? And he says, Texas. I said, you got Lone Star beer, right? He goes, well, yeah. I said, well, send me some Lone Star beer. So about 2 weeks later at the bus station called me in Grand Rapids. And they said, we've got a suitcase here for you. So I had a whole suitcase full of Lone Star beer. So I remember that and the air cleaner story really well, because of course I had the same problem in about, I don't know, 1979, 1980, trying to tune up a guy's car, just driving me crazy. And I finally put the air cleaner on it and bingo, it ran perfectly. So I know that the air cleaners are really an important thing.
John?
Yes.
I'm just wondering, does that apply at low speed operation? You know, for tuning when you got to reach in there and raise the piston?
Okay, you don't have to reach in. That's kind of the cool thing. You can either unscrew this cap, angle it real severely, and just lift a little bit. Just lift it a little bit. Just angle it so it jams the air piston and lift, and the air piston will lift, and you can judge the change in RPM.
Oh.
Or you can take the adjuster tool, which has got the 1/8 inch Allen key right down the middle and a barrel on the outside, and you can load one way and the other one the other way, just gently, so it sort of grabs it and pick up on the air piston, just pick up on it just a little tiny bit. So you don't have to have the air cleaner off to tune it.
So you're talking like a fraction of an inch to lift it?
A fraction of an inch, the littlest you can possibly lift it. Yep, and judge the change in RPM. And of course, if it, just like in SU, if the RPM falls away instantly, it's too lean. You got to turn the tool clockwise, bring the needle up into the piston, so it pulls the needle out of the jet and makes it richer. On the other hand, if it's too rich, start to lift the air piston. The higher you lift it, the faster it goes. It's already too rich, and you're leaning it out, making it run more efficiently. So you've got to unscrew that adjuster.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. So do I have some more questions about Stromberg carburetors?
Hey, John.
Yes.
Quick question. I saw a couple Zenith Strombergs. One had a fuel feed from the left side. The other had a fuel feed from the right side.
Okay. So this is an early one. This is an early one, and it feeds from the front, which means that the fuel line has to run all the way behind the box and all the way up front where it can overheat. Later, they put it on the back side. I think maybe certainly 77 through 80. 75 was from the front, maybe 76 is from the front, but by 77 through 80, it's on the rear. And of course, there are all different applications for Stromberg. So they're drilled, there's already bosses in there. So especially if you get into Volvos or TR6s and stuff, there's hand chokes. There's all kinds of other stuff that goes on there, and all kinds of different ways to hook up lines. Oh, I forgot to mention at the top here, this is ported vacuum. So if you're running a 41427 distributor, early style distributor that requires ported vacuum, not manifold vacuum, ported vacuum, you can pick it off right from here. This goes to the EGR valve, which exhausts gas recirculation, some more emissions. Hocus pocus. So,
do you want to talk about the different types of oil? And I have taken your advice on using the heavier oil, but I actually had some trouble. I did put it in the chat. You can skip it when you get there.
Okay, so down inside, this is the part I said I was going to come back to. So thanks for reminding me. Way down inside this piston, which you can't see, is and down the other side is that where the tool goes is a little tiny brass piece. I showed it in the constant contact note that I sent out yesterday, the couple little pieces, the star washer and everything. So that turns and there's an O-ring on the outside of it. Well, the vacuum underneath here is just ginormous, incredibly strong. And it will suck the oil out of the dashpot and into the airflow over a short period of time if that O-ring fails. When it fails, it always fails over a period of time. So even on a light tune-up, a real quick tune-up, you should change the O-ring. So that's one of the problems with running the Stromberg is that it sucks the oil out of there. The thicker the oil, the longer the oil lasts in there. Now, if you don't mind foraging in the trash at the gas station, somebody else has already bought some oil, a quart of oil, and has left part of it in the can because they're in a hurry. They're not frugal. They didn't pour it all out, and you can just pour that into your carburetor or carry it with you. You tried 80, 90 weight, and you didn't like the results?
So what I found was, especially when it was cold, it seemed like the piston would it wouldn't drop down. So let's say I was, driving, I let go and it wouldn't flop down fast enough. And I'd see the RPMs go boom, fall almost to the point of stalling, or sometimes even stalled and then bounce back up again.
Okay, all right. I would suggest that maybe there was something that was dirty in there too, but hey,
It's possible. It doesn't have. It's a fairly low mileage. I only have about 40,000 miles on the car, so maybe I haven't driven enough.
It could have been driven through a sandstorm, so
yeah, it's true.
Yeah. People used to call me and say, "Oh, I found this 1980 MG BLE with only 12 miles on it." You think it'd be a good deal, and it's like, I don't know. If you're 70 years old and you're going to marry a woman who's never been married, I mean, I don't know. So sometimes it's nice if there's some miles on them. It's tried and tested.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sometimes it's best to just marry the car.
Marry the car. Yeah. Okay. Very good. So,
John, I've got a question for you.
Yeah, Richard.
I have a 75, 76 midget.
Oh,
it's in
okay.
between with an FM engine. So
Yep.
it's got a Triumph engine on it.
Yeah.
My Stromberg's got a manual choke on it.
It's a
And I just
75
took a
then, right?
photograph of it, and where the 175 would be is a blank, and it just says CD at the top. Is there anything unique about that changes what you've been talking about other than the automatic choke?
No, no,
Okay.
it's the same. Your overrun valve is altogether different. Right on the front of the shaft, up here at the front side of the carburetor, where I'm showing the carburetor shaft here. There's a little pyramid device, and it's got a slotted screw, and you want to unscrew that screw all the way, and that renders the overrun valve null and void. The reason that you've got an overrun valve on here is so that when you shut this throttle disc at 60 miles an hour and it's just shut down, there's not enough air fuel getting into the engine to combust. So you're running raw air fuel right out the tailpipe as you decelerate. The government doesn't want that, doesn't want the unburned hydrocarbons in the air. So they put in this valve to slow deceleration that pulls open and lets enough air come in to combust. But the car slows down slowly. If you want a nice positive response from the throttle where your head pops forward when you take your foot off the gasoline, then shut that valve down. It just makes it run so much better.
Okay.
There are little tiny O-rings in there too, in the bypass valve, and a little diaphragm. I found
There's a little diaphragm. Yeah.
Out. Yeah.
Nothing that a good squeeze out of a tube of ultra black or the right stuff won't
True.
seal up. I hate to do that. I can't.
I actually have mine tuned as the factory manual tells you. It runs fine.
Okay.
Although
good.
maybe it contributes to my other issue. I don't know, but
So you've got a midget also?
Yeah, 75, just like he was
Okay,
talking.
all right.
My
okay.
one bit of advice on the manual choke is that the little body I found can warp a little bit, and you had actually had a video about flattening out the
Yes.
radiator, the thermostat housing. Well, I found that same trick worked on the choke
The
housing because I had a leak there. Boy, did that make a difference on the way the car ran.
Okay, so
Oh my God.
that is absolutely true on the automatic choke too, in that the three screws here, over a period of time, squeeze the gasket and it becomes concave. And then the gasoline can move between these two ports, even though this is all tight, even though the choke is off, because of the warpage on that. So during a good tune-up, or certainly during a carburetor rebuild, you always scuff this. But then you get all this dust, all this aluminum dust. And if that gets inside to the kick piston, then the kick piston jams shut. So you got to be real cautious what you're doing. But yes, that warpage is real important. And you can take a 75 choke from a midget, and you can fit that to an MGB. It does work.
One other bit of advice I've experienced was that the little cam that rotates in the manual choke and maybe in the automatic one too, you could put that back in 180 degrees apart if you're not paying attention. The manual actually shows you the right orientation. Ask me how many weeks I went with that backwards before I figured it out.
Yeah.
Question for you. Is there a source for factory air cleaners? Because I've been
They seem to be out right now. That's, I heard from somebody, I don't hear so much about midgets, but I heard from somebody about MGB filters. It's like, how can there not be an air B filter? But I'm sure Moss is, along with others, is scrambling to come up with these things. So they'll come along in a while, you know. I'm sure they will, but I don't know of any source unless somebody else.
I've just jerry rigged a different kind of air filter in there.
You do what you have to do.
The best I could.
I have heard that there are some modern sizes that fit, at least on the midget, that there's, I think, like a Nissan one or something that will fit in there. That's what.
I think that's that ad for eBay from the Flick and Plaque. You know, with a saw sawing the air cleaner to make it fit. But you just do what you have to do. So,
John?
Yeah, Richard.
Just back to that adjustment on that damper valve a little bit where you raise it slightly.
Yes, sir.
About how, can you give me a time in seconds about how soon the RPM ought to fall off again?
Instantly. So what is you begin that position of that air piston is critical for the mixture. So once you disturb that, the car's going to run differently or instantly. So if it's too lean and you lift that piston, then the RPM is going to fall off immediately. And then if it's too rich and you lift that piston, it's going to lean it out and make it run better. So it'll run faster immediately. What you want in the end is just as you begin to just disturb the position, it runs a little faster and then falls away. So a little faster means like 50 to 100 RPM, barely hear it.
Okay.
So you lift. If you press down, it's gonna enrich the mixture. Don't want to do that. You want to lift up. That's how you judge the change in mixture. So
Okay.
it'll happen right then.
I just had one comment too about the choke. When I was going through mine earlier this summer, I had the choke almost completely apart with that brass valve and that, the valve that you just described with the little O-ring and everything. I had taken that plug off of it so I could take the outer part of that brass valve out and clean it good and everything too. Well, once I got it all back together and everything, the car was still running, seemed to be way too rich. And that caused me a lot of grief. But what I ultimately found out was when I put that kind of pushed that valve back into the aluminum housing, I didn't get it quite seated. And that made a big difference when I ended up pushing it all the way home. I assume it was kind of like your warped aluminum housing. It was letting gas bypass that valve, I suppose.
Well, yeah, that valve was, the needle was coming down, but the seat against which it fit, the seat was sitting away from the valve, so the gasoline could leak underneath. So yeah,
Right.
yeah, getting that, you have to be, and if you get it too far up, there's a problem too. So it's a judicious operation.
Yeah. You know, just a word to the wise, I guess, because you don't see those kind of things in videos.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Do we have some more
And-
questions?
Pan Am does offer a filter for an MGB. I
Who's
put one
that?
in, Russ Lefevre. K&M filters.
Oh, okay, all right, but those are like $100, right? You got to oil them.
I can't remember. It's too long ago now.
I think they're about, they're the oil wetted ones.
Yep.
Yep,
One lasts forever.
yes,
Yeah, John? Yeah,
yes,
they run $129. I had to buy a set.
okay,
Well,
Oh, you-
because the regular ones are not available.
correct. Yep. Yep. So I think the paper ones will be available again, I'll bet. Somebody will make them. But right now, yeah, you can argue that the K&N filters are better. But they have to be washed and they have to be re-oiled. Without any oil, they don't cleanse the air as it goes through.
Hey, John,
Yes,
Gary Greenspoon here. How you doing?
pretty good.
I joined your meeting late. I sent in the notes that I joined the meeting half hour late. I got a Stromberg. Can I see the video later?
Yes, I'll have it posted up. I'll have it posted up sometime soon. That's all I can say. But I've got a bunch of videos.
I've seen
Okay.
I've seen much stuff. I'm just another thing that I said the car runs great. I'm just afraid to touch the carb. How do I know if it's running rich or lean?
If it runs great, it's like, I'll say what our late president Ronald Reagan said: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But you raise, you pull this damper when it's idling, angle this damper off to the side to grab the air piston and just lift it a little tiny bit, just a bit, and judge the change in RPM. And if it goes up, you're idling too rich. If it immediately stumbles and falls, you're idling too lean. But if you take the spark plugs out of your car after a 10-mile run and take a look at them, and they're like khaki colored, then tan, the car's running great.
That's good. They are. Yeah, it is good. Actually, that's the first time in all the years I've seen so much information about pulling the dashpot off and seeing how it idles after that. So
Good.
I'll check that out. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have more questions about?
Hey,
Stromberg?
John.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, I hear a lot about carburetors and whatnot. What octane level for fuel do you recommend for the MGs? 87, 89, 92?
89's fine. Now, my MGA has got pretty high compression. I've calculated it up to about 10-1, so I use iTest in that. But the cars are the 8-to-1 engines. I mean, they're all made to run on cheap gas. So 89 octane's just fine.
Thank you.
Unless you know that your engines have been hotted up, and the compression's been raised or something. If you get dieseling when you turn it off, you shouldn't. 1973 through 1980, there's an anti-run-on circuit, which most often doesn't work. But when it does work, car shuts off dead. But other cars, if they diesel, you can try some higher gasoline higher octane gasoline and see if that makes a difference. But if you're going to go up and buy 90, 91 or 93, I think we're still paying a surcharge for Hazelwood's Beachy and the Exxon Valdez. I mean, that was an expensive spill. They're making it up someplace yet. I'm sure they are.
Well, I was just kind of curious because I talked to you, this probably about 6 months ago. I start the car fires up great. I go for a run for about a half hour, 45 minutes. I pull into a gas station. I fill the car up with gas, turns around, I start it. I get maybe about 200 yards down the road and the thing stalls. And then I turn around and it's like, wait a minute, it won't start. I have to let it sit there for 30 minutes. And I'm wondering because I'm putting 91 in there, I wonder if it's running too hot because I've already done the charcoal canisters like you told me.
Okay. All right. Well, generally speaking, the higher the octane, the cooler it runs, because the slower the gasoline burns. So there are a couple ways to start the car. If you've got that problem, and the problem almost always is the gasoline is boiling and the mixture just gets so screwed up it doesn't want to run. So if you just hold your foot to the floor, don't pump it, don't put pumping that doesn't do anything anyway, just hold it to the floor and crank. That often will help it. It will help it start. And the other way, which always works but requires two people, is you angle we're back to the damper again, pretty handy tool on a Stromberg, is you angle this thing on the side, pick it up so you can feel the piston, you can feel it come up. Have somebody crank it, it'll start right up. And then just let it fall back into place.
I just wanted to mention that I've usually used 87, and the reason is well, one, it runs fine. I can tell you that on my midget with all the original emission stuff on it, if everything's working fine, the car will want to tear down the road. So if your car is doing that, then you've got everything working right. And I owe you all, I owe John all that because from watching his videos, that's how I got it to that point. But I've read that the higher the octane, the more ethanol there may be in the fuel, which might contribute to the like vapor lock type of situation.
So Glenn Lenhard called me from Florida a couple years ago. Maybe I think I was still at the shop then, so that's probably 8 years ago. Out of his mind, he's just so frustrated because the MGC that he's driving for a customer, trying to get the thing tuned up to get it back to him, it'll kill at a stop sign. It boom, 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 and then it won't restart. Right? Won't because it's too hot. Won't restart. And he's just going nuts. And he actually took some 93 octane or whatever they have in Florida at the time, that mix, and put it on the cylinder head along with other gasoline. And it turned out that the other gasoline boiled first. So the high octane gasoline had no alcohol in it. And so that's what he suggested to his customer that he use with no alcohol. And of course, there is that thing you can get on your phone that's pure gas, pure-gas.org, or I don't know, there must be an app on the phone for it because you're not going to look for that. But it's pure gas, and those are the stations near you that don't have alcohol. And that can be a real help in getting the cars to run well. There's a new book out, Modern Fuels, Old Cars, something or other. And the guy goes on for pages, and it's in little tiny type. And all the diagrams are like little tiny. It's very difficult to read physically. For me, it was. But the guy's doing it all on his TC with SU carburetors. It's a British book, but it all has to do with gasoline and alcohol and all that kind of stuff. And God knows in California, Pat's on, I see Pat's on, he'll tell us whether you can even buy non-alcohol gasoline in California. You probably can't.
You can't in Massachusetts, except if you go to like an airport.
Well, yeah, and then that, I mean, theoretically, think about it, that's illegal because you're not paying the road tax, right?
They also have the leaded fuel there too.
Not very leaded.
Yeah, no.
Not very leaded, because they worked real hard at banning that, so.
Also, John, I was just reading, they're in process, the gasoline companies of changing from quote, summer blend to winter blend. I don't know what the heck that means. I just run the 87 alcohol free and it seems to work. But that has something to do with oxygenating the gasoline or some kind of crap like that. And so you have no vague idea what's going into the tank.
That you don't. I remember one time I bought a part from one of the major suppliers, and the rubber which held the sending unit onto the gas tank expanded. It got about that big, and of course my customer is in his garage and he's gasoline swilling all over the floor. So he calls me up because I'm the last guy that worked on this. I'm the guy that put the sending unit in. And so I called my major supplier and I said, what's with this? I mean, come on, my customer just chewed me out, said, and the response from the major supplier was, well, what kind of gasoline are you using? I said, I don't know what, no one knows. No one knows. In California, they used to put MTBE in it. And then it turned out that was like frightfully dangerous. And so that's all gone. They experiment all the time. It's a deal with the environmental people trying to get as few unburned hydrocarbons in the atmosphere as possible. It's not to make our cars run good. It's to make sure that everything is reduced to carbon dioxide and water when it comes out the tailpipe.
Yeah, it's not the tree huggers, it's the corn farmers.
You can buy more alcohol-free gasoline in Iowa and Kansas than any other states. Go figure. I was just through there, and they got alcohol-free gasoline everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like, anyway, yes, we can go down the conspiracy.
No, it's not.
They need it for their tractors.
Yeah,
John?
Exactly.
John Gary here, game.
Yeah.
So my Dashpot O-ring was changed, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. How would I change it myself when the carb is in the car?
Watch my video. I actually have one. I don't know what video it is. 386. Okay. I don't know, but it's someplace in there. Stromberg. Just go on YouTube yep. We use just common tools you have at home. It's a horrific process because you've got a star washer that scars up the inside of the dashpot as you drive it out. It's horrible, but what else are you going to do? And you put the new number 10 O-ring on there and grease it up a whole lot, put it back in, and that'll last.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
John?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry to bother you again, but I keep thinking of these questions about tuning the ZS carb on my 80 LE, and I'm still not, it's better, but it's still got a ways to go, I'm sure. When you tune that, lifting the piston a little bit and all that, is that to be done at a normal operating temp?
Mm-hmm.
Could I do it cold or?
No, you gotta wait. You gotta wait till it's all come up to normal. It's got to run for at least 5 minutes first or so the engine's up to temperature. Because that's where you want it to run correctly is after it's hot when you're driving it around and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks again.
Okay. All right. So we've talked about Strombergs for a lot here. Do we have any more Stromberg questions?
Hey, John.
Yes.
Quick question. On the HS carbs, the MGBs, they all had a little venturi in the air filter, a little added on venturi. So how come they don't have that on the Zenith Stromberg? And of course, you can always add it into the H style carburetors.
You're talking about flaring this circumference?
Yeah. Well, they had an add-on in the air filter.
Yeah, you can argue it's part of the carburetor. When Carl Heidemann checked, you know, he ran a car with those and without them. That's the only change he made. You know, just sucking air in, and he put those things on. He got 2 more horsepower on an MGB. And 2 horsepower, well, how much is that? Well, you're getting about 60 at the rear wheels. So 2 horsepower turns out to be a lot. You know, it's not 2%, but it's pushing 2%. Yeah, it's dramatic. And Triumphs don't have it. Nothing else has it. I don't know. I don't know. You'd think that it would make a huge difference. But I'll tell you, anything you do on this that screws up the amount of vacuum that is available up here, anything you do makes the car run wonky. So you take a lot of experimentation to come up with a stub stack for a Stromberg that would work and cause the car to run well at the same time. So.
One thing I've learned that you really have to make sure your choke is correctly, all the goods and bits and bytes on it are all good before you try adjusting your piston. I mean, your carburetor, if your choke's not right, it's, when you're all done, it's not going to be right.
Well, that's why it said, you know, take if you got a question at all, take these 3 screws out, the triangular screws here at the bottom, and just let this thing drop away from the carburetor and just see how it runs without the choke attached. Because you can't check the choke. I've never been successful checking the choke, but you can check the carburetor without the choke on there. So easy to do, except on a midget 1500, where it's slightly less difficult if you take the bonnet off. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, John, when I was doing the mine on the 80 a while back, I had the choke clear off of it. And I just connected the water line so it would just bypass the carburetor completely. And I found with a little starting fluid sprayed into one of those holes on the side of the carburetor, you know, I could get it started. Once it was started, it would run okay, or better, I would say, not necessarily okay. But yeah, and you know, I've had different ones suggest that I go to a manual choke.
Well,
and you know, as I study that thing, I'm still using like 85% of the same choke, right? All
well,
the manual choke's doing is working that little lever there.
making sure that it's all the way
very
off,
well, right?
making sure it's all the way off, and making sure it's all the way on. That's all. And if everything is clear, if everything's working, I just put up a YouTube video just this past week where I took a hose and put it on this hole on the backside that receives the vacuum, and you can see the vacuum kick piston work. You can see that slam up and down. I just put that video up. So no, I'm no, people put on a hand choke because they can't figure out what's going on, and it seems like an easier solution. I just took one off an MGB, you know, I took it off. I said, no, and that was the one that I found that this hole up here that goes through this little brass piece at the top, that was plugged up. And so there was no vacuum, therefore the choke was jammed on the whole time, you know, but once I cleared that up and the vacuum kick piston could float, or the bimetal strip could make it all work correctly, then it worked. So call me sometime, Richard, and we'll talk some more about your
okay.
I know you've been struggling with this for,
I mean, it's
at least a
one point I
season.
did find that little brass fitting, or whatever you want to call it, there orifice it appeared to me it was plugged. So I used a little tiny wire to kind of clear that out with some carb cleaner sprayed in.
Yeah, I just ran through there with a 35 thousandths drill. I don't remember what's it. No, it was a 15 gauge wire drill. So yeah, on my
I thought
video.
at first that when the car started cold, that it would take a quite a while for the water to warm up enough for that spring to unwind. But I just had it started for cold today, and it really only takes 2, maybe 3 minutes till that choke housing is getting pretty doggone warm.
That is correct. That's because that water doesn't go through the thermostat or anything. It comes right off the head and right back into the water pump. I had one time where the fitting on the return line that's underneath the carburetor, the water return line was plugged. I don't know how long it had been plugged. Looked like it was brazed shut. So it's like, how long has it been like that since it was new? And so the water was not able to circulate through here. And so it always stayed cold. So the choke always stayed on. There's all kinds of possibilities, all kinds of weirdnesses that you can have. So I don't have a complete list of all the weird stuff that I found, but I already picked up this needle, the needle that popped apart, that needle shouldn't jump out of the top of the barrel. Like, shouldn't pop out of there. But again, there's all these little things you have to look at, and when you look at them all and get them all straightened out, then the car runs great. It works just like an SU, and it's all solvable. So the reason my buzzer went off was, what are you showing me there, Pat? I don't even see what that is.
So John, there were 2 versions of the needles for Stromberg. So the one you were showing has a tang, right? Where they just punched a hole and bent the tab over.
Right. The later ones had the
roll pins. So
yeah.
I think the ones with the roll pin are a better design.
They are.
And I have a bunch of them. So when you come out to California, let me know how many you want. Make a gift. Yeah, because they'll get thrown away when I die. So,
I'm planning to be at GOF West.
Yes, me
Carlsbad.
too.
I don't know what day yet. I'm going out to visit my daughter, and she lives just west of Pasadena, and I'm going to take her GT and drive down one day. And
nice.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, send me an email and I'll gift you some of these. They're brand new.
All right. Yeah.
45 inches.
Put them in a bag. Yeah. Thanks, Pat. That's so kind.
Well, so are you. Thanks.
Do we have any more comments about Strombergs, or we're going to get into the chat section here and talk about tire pressures and piston diameters?
I have 2 questions for you.
Yeah. Pat.
The first one is on that Dashpot plunger.
Yes.
The one that you pulled out has a clip on it. I know some do not have a clip on them. Can I remove that clip?
Well, this one used to have a clip on the end, and it's fallen off, and so
No, not that part. Up a little bit farther on the.
Up here.
Oh, one of them you pulled out had a little kind of, yeah, that right there shaky. It's got that little
I
cap.
have no idea. I have no idea what the function of that is.
Can I remove it?
Sure.
Because I know a lot of the carburetors don't have that, so I don't know what it does.
It looks like it sits in the top of the air piston.
Yes.
It looks like it does that.
But it's kind of hard to get in there.
But does it?
John, we ran into that where it came off just like that, and the car wouldn't run right. It jammed. So we put it back up and bent it and made it fit temporarily.
So look at this, I'm supporting the whole air piston. If this is pushed down inside, then you unscrew this, lift it up, and you only have to lift on the piston, and it lifts the whole assembly up. So you can adjust it. Maybe it's a little tool to help you adjust it on the road. I doubt it. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes they sit way up here at the top. They seem to be jammed up there. So I don't know. Beats me.
Okay. The second question is a little bit more complicated.
Yes, sir.
I have a 175 on a Triumph Spitfire.
Okay.
And it's got the temperature compensator, so it's different stronger than what you've got there? I can get it set up so the idle is great in my driveway. But I take it for a drive and the car warms up and the idle goes from like around 1,000 to around 2,000. And I can't figure out what would be doing that.
Well, you can block off that compensator. That does the same kind of thing this does.
Okay.
The CO thing up here, except the holes are larger. In an idle, I mean, you don't need but a couple of pinholes of air to change the idle dramatically. So it might be that it's that temperature compensator. You figure out how to block that off. That thing sits inside. I don't deal with those a lot. I've certainly worked with them on TR6s and stuff, but I don't remember. There's a nut. There's a plastic cover. There's a nut there that must be about I don't know, one
little tiny
16th of an inch. It's the tiniest nut in the world. And you just crank that thing down so that it bends that bimetal strip and just closes that thing down so it doesn't work. But if you want to make it work, I don't know how you'd set it back again. I don't know I don't know how to set it correctly. I know how to jam it. Throttle cable, that can be. I'm trying to think of why your idle's high. I mean, if there's, you know, on the MGB here, so you put the throttle cable around and you get it all set and everything, and you do that when it's off. This thing's idling at 2,500 RPM because you operated the automatic choke, and the automatic choke has put this guy on, has moved him some, and he's moved him, the automatic choke has, so if you tighten him up, he won't come back to where he's supposed to be. So there, sometimes just make sure that you can take your throttle cable after it's warm. You should be able to take the throttle cable and just grab a hold of it and turn it and not have anything happen.
Okay. I know that sometimes I can blip the throttle and it'll come down.
Okay.
That doesn't always work.
Is it an automatic choke?
It's a manual choke.
Okay. Well, then that arm that the gentleman was talking about before that he had on upside down or backwards for a while until he sorted it out. Those things stick. Those are real sticky. Nice to have a spring on those to pull them off. And
I put an extra spring on it, trying to pull it down.
Okay.
And I've tried lubricating it, and nothing seems to work.
Well, something will. So yeah. you can call me tomorrow if you want. We can talk about it just a little bit more. 175 is a real big carburetor for that engine. So
well, I figured it was similar to putting the dual SU.
Okay.
1.5s on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so, no, the inch and 3/4 is well over half again as large as an 1.5 inches, just because of all that extra room on the outside. It's dramatic. Right. Yeah.
Hey, John, Gary again. So yeah, when I go to look for your video, is there a number? How do I find it?
You go on YouTube and you look for University Motors Stromberg or John Twist Stromberg, and then you get probably 10 or 12 hits.
I'm talking about this session right now.
Oh, this one. Well, it will be up on YouTube by the end of the week, and it'll probably be around, the number on it will probably be around 505.
Okay, thank you.
Just a guess.
That's fine, thanks.
I did put the playlist for carburetors in general and then Stromberg specifically in the chat too.
Thank you.
Hey, John?
Yes.
John to Carly. We've got a 1980 MGB we've had for about 35 years. So a couple of years ago, I bought a rebuild kit. And after 3 attempts, got it back together each time, it ran lousy. He called you. You had me talk to a young man who said, well, how do you set the float ball? And I told him, well, right by the book. He said, well, that's your problem. He said, turn it over, look at the parting line on the casting, and set the float level so it's level with that parting line on the casting. Fixed it beautifully, put it back together. The only problem I've had, which I just have never gone back in to fix, is the car starts and runs beautifully cold. As it warms up, the idle just keeps creeping up until it gets up to about 16 to 1700 RPM. And I cannot adjust it down manually. I think what happened, if it's possible, when I put the throttle plate back in, I wasn't real careful to make sure it was centered perfectly before I tightened the screws down. That's a possibility. Makes sense.
That certainly is a possibility. When this guy is shut down, when he's shut, I mean, you should be able to turn this thing up and pour water into it and not have it dribble out the other side. I mean, okay. All but. I mean, of course it'll dribble, but it shouldn't dribble much. But that the throttle cable is just it's a real easy thing that is overlooked sometimes. So take that throttle cable and just turn it just while it's idling, and it shouldn't affect the idle at all.
No, you can let the throttle. You can just count on it going up there, and it never settles back down until it gets cold.
Well, it's because too much air is getting through it. It has nothing to do with gasoline. It has to do with the air.
I must have cocked the throttle plate. Okay, I just after doing that carburetor 4 times, I just didn't want to do it a 5th time.
Yeah.
All right, I'll do that. Fortunately, she drives it about 50 miles a year, and she doesn't complain about it.
Okay, all right. It's hard to stall at the corner if it's hard to stall at a stop sign if you're doing 1500 RPM. So
the only mistake she ever made, I told her make sure you use the ethanol-free fuel. One day she forgot, and the hoses were old, and that caused them to fail in the garage. So. Ooh. Yeah, that was ugly.
The hoses that they used, I don't know what manufacturer it was, but the hoses that they used, 77 through 80. I don't have a hose here I can show you, but normally a hose, if you took a hose, it would leak somewhere around here. And it goes around the corner, it gets cracks in it, and it starts to weep and everything. But the hoses, 77 through 80, fracture lengthwise. They're horrid. Oh my gosh, they're so dangerous. I mean, they're probably all gone by now, but the ones that are in the trunk, in the boot, that go between the tank and the condensing canister, and the condensing canister and the line that goes up to the charcoal canister, those will fracture. You don't pay any attention to them, and then you're driving, you get this horrible smell of gasoline all the time. And it's wafting up out of the trunk. There's no substitute to replacing all the hoses, all the fuel hoses, all the evaporative hoses, and use Gates green hose. Somebody else on the green bandwagon, there's even a green thread through it. But the hose, if you take a normal piece of hose and fill it with gasoline and wait a year, the gas isn't in there anymore, or at least not all of it. So the new Gates green hose lets less gasoline evaporate through the rubber, or whatever it is. Lets less evaporate than old-fashioned hose. So that's what you're after.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is that literally green hose?
No, it's black. It's black hose with a green thread through it.
Oh,
just green enough for him to jump on the environmental wagon.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to switch over here to our chat section, or else we're going to lose that because we're at 8:14 already on my clock here. But I did want to make another pitch for going on on the University Motors websites, one or the other, universitymotorsltd.com or universitymotors.online, and making a contribution through PayPal. I'll respond. I'll thank you forever, and I'll read your name. So anyway, thanks. Okay, over to the chat section here. Doug Miller, John, you and I talked a couple of weeks ago regarding AT205 reseal, which allegedly helps stop leaks. I tried this before a 6-hour drive, and so far there appears to be a significant reduction in the oil leak for my rear seal. Okay, so this is what Doug, are you still on?
So yeah, do you remember that phone call?
Yes. I just talked to a guy the other day. I'd had his car for too long in my shop, and he says, well, I know you changed all those seals, but you know, it still leaks. I said, of course it still leaks, but I'll ask him to use that AT205 and see if that'll slow it down. Hey,
It was $20.
yeah, yep. That's about as much as an industrial gallon of Tide detergent, which you have to use to scrub the floor.
The only other comment to add to that, I drove it up to Stowe, Vermont for the British Invasion show, and I was talking to some people up there. And one of the guys I talked to is an engineer by education and owns a oil byproduct packaging company. And he said he understood what it did, but he said, be careful after you run it the 5, 6, 7 hours, as the directions say, to change the oil right away. Otherwise, that fluid will sit in there and continue to work on the seals, perhaps to a point to overcorrection.
Got it.
So I did that.
Follow the instructions. Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much, Doug. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Marty's got a direct link to our PayPal. Thank you, Marty. Judd, my neighbor Peter's MGTD has a dual exhaust. It has a split cast iron exhaust manifold. The manifold to pipe gaskets have developed leaks. Any idea who might carry those gaskets? Not a clue, Judd. I don't.
Okay, Pat G has been showing me some. I'm going to try to get in touch with him offline and see. I think that it's obviously an aftermarket product, and I don't know what size it's going to take, but
well, it's
we'll figure it out. But if anybody has dual exhaust on their TD, let me know. I've got my email. You can get my email address from John. Thank you.
You can talk to Tom Longa up in Maine.
Right.
He had a display at the Kimber. I'm wearing my Kimberfest shirt, as a matter of fact. Where's it embroidered for the Kimberfest? So Tom, 2 years ago at Kimberfest, showed, hey, okay, showed us all kinds of aftermarket stuff that was available in the 50s.
That's a great idea. I talk to Tom about once a year. I'll give him a call.
Okay. He'll know what you're talking about, first of all. So.
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right, we're going to move on here. So Marty's put on here that there are 11 new YouTube videos over the past month, and she's got a link to them. So from Mike C in Massachusetts, I appreciate this discussion. I think you said that to ignore this because yep. So as long as it comes down, as long as it comes down, it doesn't have to come down fast enough if you're slowing down, unless it's coming down way too slow. I know that they fall and they seem to hang and then they fall. But if you're watching what's going on, if you start to reaccelerate, then it'll be working out okay. So from Pat G, yeah, all right, Pat G's got these needles, a bunch of 45H needles. Oh my gosh, thank you. I will. I'll look forward to seeing you out at GOF West. Thank you. Dean Webb, restoring a 71 midget. Hey, I'm working on a 68. Together with a Datsun 5-speed conversion. The few gearbox shops, transmission shops I've talked to recommend 30-weight non-detergent oil only in that old box. You mean in the original box? Is that what you mean, Dean? Dean's still on. Maybe I didn't answer Dean soon enough and he's stepped away, but in the midget 71 gearbox, it calls for engine oil. So the thicker the better. But because I've got no idea what a Datsun 5-speed conversion oil would be. I don't even know. But I know that the midget 1275 gearbox is a lot quieter with 90 weight in it. Oh, 90 weight, is that good? Well, I don't know. Is it good on your ears? We've drained everything out of gearboxes. We've drained ATF, engine oil, and 90 weight out of all gearboxes. And any oil is better than no oil. And sometimes thicker oil is nice, especially on a midget where it's so friggin' noisy in first. So.
Hey, John.
Yes.
One thing I'll mention is back in 1987, when I was in Wisconsin, it was like 20 below or 20 degrees. I had 90 weight oil in my MGA, and it was really hard to shift that transmission until it warmed up.
I'll bet. I'll bet. Caroline and I drove our 73 BGT every day of the year, just to prove we could do it. Plus, it was our car. We didn't, we had a soccer mom van to cart the kids around, but we drove the BGT to work. And so you'd start that up out in the garage, and July, and on January 7th or February 7th or something or other. And you'd start it, and you'd watch the oil pressure. And you get about 2 pounds, then you get about 4 pounds. It's idling, and it's in a very, very, very slowly over about 2 or 3 minutes, you'd finally come up to engines, because it's just you're trying to imagine that oil pump, it's trying to suck that stuff up. But yeah, so nobody drives their cars like that anymore, except for Barney. Barney probably drives his car like that. And Bob and Gloria, they just had an exciting adventure out west. When he called me after he had the second problem, I said, well, problems come in threes, so you can expect to have another one. He goes, well, you know what? We already had a first one I didn't talk to you about. so after their third problem, I think they got home just fine.
We made it home yesterday about a little after 11, and I want to give it a tech tip. The rod from the slave cylinder, you told me to put maybe a 5/16 nut on. It's nearly impossible to get it in there, but Gloria came up with a tech tip. She said, I don't know if you can see this, use this. It's like a snap that you maybe like on your jeans.
Okay.
And we use your favorite tool, put grease all over it, stuck it on that thing and put it in, and worked fine.
So what was happening is that something's worn on the inside of the clutch assembly. So if you gave a full depression with the clutch pedal, it would pop the piston out of the end of the slave. And of course, then the clutch doesn't work at all, and you got to take the slave loose and then pop it right back together and bleed it, and it works just fine again. But
don't push it to the floor.
Don't push it to the floor.
It's the bushes in the fork, the bush in the fork, because it was moving up and down, not just this way.
And So I suggested to put something between the inside of the piston where the push rod goes, so that it would push the piston into the cylinder just a little bit more, so it wouldn't pop out. So anyway, you found a snap.
Yeah, it just, yeah, Gloria said, hey, why don't we use this? She comes up with stuff. So, yeah, we made it home okay. In fact, we're about to pull the engine. We got everything done, but the bottom bolts and the bell housing, we're getting old. So we got tired, had to come in and eat, and we'll maybe finish it tomorrow or the next day.
Hey, very, very cool. So, and then how long was that trip, and where'd you go?
Oh my, how much time you got?
Well,
7,000.
The paragraph story, you know.
Well, 7,000 miles, a little better than 7,000. We went to the show in Kansas City. They went up north and went across the Dakotas and into Montana, and that's where the wheel hub spun, and got a hold of Bruce Feldman. His AAA told me 100 miles to his house. He has a nice, he's selling it. He has a nice guest house. He gave us a real cheap rate, and it's a one-day job, but there's no such thing as overnight shipping in Kalispell. So it took 6 days. And
to get an overnight shipment in Montana, huh?
Yeah, exactly, in that little town. So
but we made it to the coast.
and then after that, we had my right front calipers hung up. All of a sudden, brakes smoking. We pull over the side. I thought, I hope I don't have to rebuild the caliper, but the cheapest thing is look at that hose. We always carry a brake hose. So on the side of the road, we put a new brake hose in it, and we were off again. But now my rear main seal is leaking. So
yeah,
we got to pull it out to fix that bush anyways.
And the main problem that you were talking about happened in Reno, right?
No, it happened in well, first problem happened in Missoula, Montana, but the clutch part happened just about, we were in Reno, a suburb of Reno. And you call around to ask people, and what is an MG? What kind of car is that? Who makes it? And I said, yeah. So I'll tell you, we've been doing these trips since 1975. We used to see other MGs on the road. We don't see that anymore. And I can't tell you how many people don't know what it is. One guy, we pulled over to check something on a map, and a guy in a pickup truck pulled over in front of us. I thought, oh man, I hope I didn't do something to tick him off. He says, I saw your car. I just have to ask you, what is that? And so it's quite an adventure.
It was fun.
Yeah, it was.
I am glad you connected with Bruce Feldman. He ran his family business here in Syracuse for many, many years. And I know he went out to Kalispell a few years ago.
Yeah, he said the weather, he went out for the weather. Now that sounds funny, but compared to upstate New York, Kalispell has mild winters.
There is nothing wrong with the weather in Syracuse.
All I know in Cleveland, when the winter gets bad, I just say, I'm glad I don't live in Buffalo, where they measure the snow by feet, not inches.
Me too.
Yeah. But
Okay.
yeah, he's a nice guy. He's real
Bob
nice.
and Gloria, what were you driving?
The 74 MGB Roadster,
Wonderful.
518,000 miles now. It's about broke in.
And this is the first time you really had three problems that stopped you.
Yeah, this is the first time.
But we kept going.
But
Well,
yeah,
after the
Temporarily.
finish, sure, yeah.
and I got my mechanic with me, so we carry coveralls, and so we're, we can fix what we can fix. And like I said, Bruce, and I gotta tell you, I got the parts from I couldn't get a hold of Scott from Warren, so I got the parts from Denver. Sports
Car Craftsman. Ian
Those
and Paul.
two guys really great, and they don't take charge cards, so they send you the parts with an invoice and expect you to send them a check. I'm thinking, I wonder how many times they got stiffed, but they said no, they don't. MG people usually send them a check. So it took me a couple of days, and I called them up and said, yeah, you probably heard this before, but the check's in the mail. So, but it was a great trip. We even made it to the coast. So if we had more time, I'd tell you more about it, but it was great.
Wonderful. Should write an article for David Sturzma for Moss Motoring, I mean, really.
Yeah, I keep a couple of
Yeah.
people
Work on it.
in the national club and local club tell me I should write a book. I don't know who'd read it. I would, but
All right. Hey, thanks very much. On to our chat here. Sandy, if the diaphragm is thick or stiff in the Stromberg carburetor, if the diaphragm is real thick or stiff, will it affect the piston movement? Some of the manufactured diaphragms seem really, really stiff, too stiff. So I've never had one that has been too stiff. They sure seem stiff. Some of them are just like, oh my gosh, really? Will this work? But I think maybe it just slows the motion. Eventually the air piston is going to get there. And you just can't imagine the vacuum that's up above here. I mean, it's just enormous. So it's stiff or not, I think they all work. Let's see. Yep, let's see, Gary Greenspoon came into the meeting half hour late. Take care of that. I'm missing the whole choke assembly. It seems to cost more than the whole carburetor. Does anyone have a parts carburetor they want to get rid of? Oh my gosh, Cactus1800@gmail. Call Paul and Ian at Sports Car Craftsman and get them to send you a rebuilt unit so you don't have to rebuild it yourself and put it on. That'd be a real good spot. And there's got to be any British car swap meet where people have boxes of used and broken parts. There's always Stromberg carburetors in there, always. So anyway, Cactus1800@gmail needs that choke. Okay. Tony Wisely, does anyone know how much a complete Zenith Stromberg mounted on the original manifold is worth? With the catalytic converter having been gutted and welded, still functional? No, whatever someone will pay for it. It's, if you're desperate, it's the manifold is worth more than the carburetor, usually. But there's a lot of carburetors out there that are for sale. So Tony, you put that up there twice. Phil Kalura, following your advice, I resolved my problem of the reverse lights on constantly. Never did find a wiring diagram to match my 74B with a gearbox switch on my car. So Phil sent me a picture of the reverse light switch, and each of the terminals had two connectors on it. So they inadvertently got more wires on them than they should have.
Yeah, there's the switch.
Yeah, well, it's another application. That's all. Maybe it goes on a Jag. I mean, it's just a reverse light. It's a gearbox switch that's used on a whole host of different models. So
anyway, resolved. Also for the audience, some months back I talked about the number 3 fuse blowing. I don't know if anybody remembers. My number 3 fuse was blowing, and what it was two of the spade terminals on this switch were hanging free, and it just touched once in a while. It took me a year to find that. So anyway, but thanks again.
You're welcome. On the Stromberg carburetor, between the carburetor, between the carb and the inlet manifold is a thick bakelite block with a little arm that comes up. I was going to bring it, I forgot to, which has got a green wire that's attached to it, and that's called the manifold induction heater. And that if you've got a hole in the gasket where you're supposed to, so it can ground. And if it's cold enough, and it's got to be mighty, mighty cold outside, that'll warm up the air fuel that's going through the carburetor before it gets to the engine. Again, emission stuff. So there's a green wire that goes either around the thermostat housing or over the top of the engine that's plugged into that. And it's not uncommon to see that unplugged. And it's dancing around, and it dances and touches something, and there goes the third fuse. So you look all around for it, can't find it, put the fuse in, and then an hour later or 2 months later, it pops again. So that's a real good. Speaking of Strombergs and third fuses, which you weren't, but it reminded me. So let's see, George, I used K&N filters on my HS6 on the 64B. I found if I cleaned and re-oiled during the spring wake up, it wasn't a problem. I used them 20 years ago, only used one, one can of the special cleaner and three cans of the filter oil. So there's a testimony to a K&N filter on any of our cars. So the oil wetted filters, those are really, really nice. Marty's got a lot of stuff posted over in the chat section. You can look through the chat section yourself. A good source for finding those number 10 O-rings being discussed. I once used a Harbor Freight, won't use that again. On top of all that, it ought to be Viton on top of all that. So it's a number 10 Viton O-ring. You know, if you go to a wholesale supplier, they're happy to sell you a bag of the 25 of them, you know, for 20 bucks, but they won't sell you a single one. So I don't know of a good source. The hardware store always has a box of O-rings, but sometimes the nomenclature isn't the same. So you're gonna take your old one in. I don't remember the size, 1/4, 1/4 3/8. I don't have the size of that right off the top of my head. Doug Miller, if you've been running gas with ethanol and then moved to non-ethanol, will that require further adjustments on the car? Yes, because they're not the same fuels. So anytime you're tuning the car up, you always use the fuel that you're going to continue using throughout the season. I mean, as best as you can, but you don't spend a whole day and tune up a car on gasoline that's 3 years old and then go out later and put in fresh gasoline because the car is going to run differently, probably better, but it's going to run differently. So yeah, always tune the car with the same stuff. So, and Marty's got this up here, 393, the Stromberg. This is for Gary, who wanted to know the Stromberg carburetor auto choke. 393 is our video. We don't have, someday, we're going to have a nice grid on our website that says, oh, look, here's, you know, here's how you can find it. Here's all the steering, here's all the steering videos, here's all the rear axle videos, here's all the Stromberg videos. But after 25 years, we still don't have that list. Maybe someday. Okay, Dave Robson, what would cause a hard start when cold? I've gone through the Zenith Stromberg carburetor and choke, but the car tries to start like there's no fuel enrichment from the choke. New needles, O-ring, fast idle works normal once it starts. So you've got this guy here, right? You've got your bimetal, spring, and you boil this. That must be around video number 393 or 393. You boil this and make a mark on the outside of the circumference where this guy ends up when it's boiling, and then you can get this thing aligned. If you put him out on the carburetor, just a second here. If we put this on the choke, and the choke's down here. If we turn this, well, as seen from the front of the car, clockwise, it makes it richer. Anti-clockwise makes it leaner. So maybe you've got to turn your whole choke assembly farther clockwise so that the needle comes out of that mixture adjustment. But boy, it should start right up. I mean, if that needle has been pulled out inside here, which is the needle which comes down in here, if that's pulled out, that just floods the inside of the car with gasoline. So there's something going on with the choke there. So if who asked this? Dave Robson. If you got any questions about that, Dave, you can call me tomorrow. Be happy to talk to you about it. So and Dr. Samuels from Kalamazoo, are you still on? He's not. After you clean SUs, do you fill the carbs? Yes. Yep. So clean them with carb cleaner, and then fill the carbs with oil. You don't have to. You fill them with gasoline by turning on the key, of course. Well, this is good. Judd brought this up once before about throttle movement and whether the car runs correctly or not. And he found, I remember a year ago, he brought this up and said that the carpet was all bunched up underneath the throttle pedal, and that was interfering with the movement of the throttle, and someone couldn't get full throttle movement. Gil Dupre says, always use non-detergent oil in the gearbox or GL4 gear oil. That isn't what the workshop manual said. John Esposito was on, a couple of months ago, he came in and he does a lot of gearboxes. And his concern with detergent oil in the gearbox is that detergents foam, okay? They foam. And if you get foamy oil, then the oil pump in the overdrive can't work correctly. Other than that, I'm not sure what the problem would be with foamy oil, but that was his concern with an overdrive. I've never had a problem with an overdrive that I would have ascribed to foamy oil, but that's why he suggests non-detergent oil. Gerald Dalton, when I wash my 75 MGB, I get a puddle on the driver's floor. All right. I use very little water around the vent intake. I've got new seals between the windscreen and the body and so forth. So the question is the water coming in through the fresh air vent at the front of the windscreen, or is it coming through the windscreen pillar? That's the question. So there's a bulb underneath the car that's up above the gearbox, up towards the bell housing, and it's got a big knob on the end of it. It's a pretty good size hose, bigger around than your thumb, and that allows the water to drain out of the fresh air vent for the fresh air vent in front of the windscreen. Otherwise, that would fill up with water, and when you go around a corner, it would wash your feet. So you want to go through that with a screwdriver and clean it out. We used to, on a complete lubrication, take our air gun and just get a hold of it and blow up through it and up out of that fresh air vent in front of the windscreen. You'd get, oh my gosh, sticks and leaves and dirt and crud and dead animals. I don't know about dead animals, but all kinds of stuff would blow up out of there. And it's essential that remains clean. If you want to know whether it's the windscreen that's leaking, which it probably is, put the hose on spray. You get inside and look and have someone spray and see if you can see where the water bubbles through. And then at that point, use some sort of black silicone. We used to call it dum-dum to push down underneath there, but almost always it's the windscreen that's leaking, even though I spent a lot of time talking about the fresh air vent. Dean Hickey, are the shims on the second and third rocker arm column necessary on an 18V for the offset oil feed? So what we're talking about is that there's the rocker assembly has got 4 pedestals. The rear pedestal is drilled, so oil can go through it and get up to the rocker shaft. So all the rockers that are moving can get oil. the rocker shafts, once in a blue moon, shatter. Race car stuff. Doesn't seem to happen at normal engine use. But those shatter because the shaft is up there and it begins to tremble. So at the introduction of the 18V engine, they put these two very thin shims. They can't be 3000s, 5000s, underneath the center two rocker pedestals, so that it bows, not very much, but it bows the rocker shaft, keeps it under tension, therefore it can't shatter. So we were sitting around at a British Motor Trade Association meeting talking about those, because there isn't an official name for them. And I proposed the name anti-tramping shims. Just correct. And it sounds really British. So those are the anti-tramping shims. No, they're not necessary. I mean, they're nice to have. I mean, if you're gonna put them in, put them in, not under all fours, certainly, because you won't get any oil on number 4. But they're there just to bow that shaft, just a little tiny bit, so it can't.
I came across them when I was doing my pulling my head to have it redone, and I was just wondering.
Yeah,
they don't seem like they're less than paper thin, so that was.
They aren't. But you don't want it's a hardened shaft. You don't want to bend it much. But it just puts a little tiny bit of a bend in it to keep it from tramping, the rattling around. That's my only guess. I mean, there isn't a dip in the head there. That doesn't make sense. So that the only thing it can be is to load that. But I've never had anybody explain it to me any other way than the way I've explained it to you. So,
thank you very much.
You're welcome. And just as a comment about those rocker pedestals, if you've got an MGA and have the option of putting steel rocker pedestals instead of aluminum ones on, do it. So, Marty's put in the address here of Sports Car Craftsman in Arvada, Colorado, Denver, Colorado, Paul Dershaw, and now it's being turned over to Ian, his #1 guy there. So it's a really great place. You can call all kinds of places for used parts. And they're available on eBay, and people send them to you right away. But if you need something like right now, they don't screw around. They'll tell you right straight up if they got it or if they don't. They'll tell you how much it is, and they'll put it in the box that day, and it'll come to you. So they're really good on those used parts. Really, really good. Paul's got a massive warehouse of used parts, all MGB stuff, not so much T-type or A. I don't know about midgets. A lot of MGBs.
Evening, John.
Hey, is that Howie from Yorkshire?
Sure is. How are you?
Hey, great, Howie. How are you? So Howard and I worked together at University Motors in 1973, 50 years ago. And it was about this time, 50 years ago. No, 72. 72,
it was.
73. So it was 51 years ago that he and I got in my TF and went to Aldershot to the Black Horse car production trials where it rained all day. Oh,
that's
my.
Right.
And poor, had that aerial arrow and he ran it through a mud puddle. It never ran again. Yeah, geez. Hey, pleasure to have you on tonight.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
You had a service sheet about on the GTs and the Roasters where the door mirror is by the quarter light. It used to crack, didn't it?
Yeah, still does. Yep.
You can't email me that service sheet, could you?
Sure. Be happy to. It's dated October 1964. The factory says we recognize there's a problem with the door cracking there, but don't worry, it won't happen anymore.
Famous last words.
Yeah, all they had to do was weld this tiny little gusset all they had to do was weld a tiny, tiny little gusset in there, and bingo, it wouldn't have ever been a problem, but it's just raw sheet metal that's just bent there. So it's a raw edge, and you get any kind of vibration at all, you know, and it work hardens, and then you're done. So, yeah. So what time is it? About 2 o'clock in the morning where you are?
Yep. It's quarter to, yeah, 1:45 a.m.
All right. Okay. All right.
I'm off to bed in a minute. So I
Yeah.
thought I'd just catch you.
Hey, very nice, Howard. Thanks very, very much for coming on.
It's a pleasure, and pleasure to talk to you too.
Absolutely.
You stay safe.
Thank you. You too. God save the king. So, gee, nobody runs Canon air filters on off-road race cars. They don't filter as well as a good paper filter. But I do have them on my MGA because they're better than the stock, but won't put them on my late model truck. Okay, so, but a lot of people, those are, I thought those Canon air filters are supposed to breathe better than the paper filters. Okay.
They do breathe better, but they don't filter as well. I
Oh,
mean,
well, you can't have both now, can you?
yeah, can't have both. So you're giving up filtration for a little bit of airflow.
Okay, but if you
So
keep
use
them,
both.
if you keep them oil wetted though, if you keep them oil wetted, then they're going to do as good of a job as they can, and that's the secret to keep. I mean, that's the TD, right? That oil bath air cleaner. You got no better filter in the world than an oil bath air cleaner. But
I agree.
The TC before it and the TF and MGA after it, you're supposed to oil it. Nobody oiled their filters. Nobody oils filters. We did on a complete lube, you know, on a tune-up. But I mean, nobody in the world oils their filters.
You know, the grill on my truck occasionally stops a bug, but most of them get through to the radiator. So that's, you know, K&Ns are much the same.
Okay.
But oil filters or air filters are like spark plugs, politics, dogs, and religion.
Okay.
Everybody has their own opinion.
Okay. All right. From Lee Gilbert, I replaced the sending unit for my fans, and now the fans don't start until a much higher temperature. Is that normal? Probably. There's, you got, Lee, are you still on? Lee has timed out maybe. So that we're dealing on a 77 to 80 MGB.
Yep, 79.
Okay, and the trick is to get all the air out of the top of the radiator, and that's a real task. The way we did it, we had a pumper upper that we put on the expansion tank. So you pump it up, push the fluid into the radiator, release the cap, blah 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 blah. The air would come out through the expansion tank. Then you pump it up again, and more fluid would go in, and you do that until you couldn't hear the air bubbles come back out. So, I mean, if that sending unit is only slightly immersed in hot water, it will not work the same as if it's completely immersed. Now, theoretically, after a couple of starts and stops over the course of a couple of days, it should expel all the air that's in there if the expansion tank isn't broken, and if the expansion tank is relatively full of coolant. And it could be, of course, that the new switch, we used to call them ERP switches because the part number is URP 1126. So we call them ERP switches. But it could be that the modern manufacturer, the ERP switch, isn't doing it quite like it should. If you want to check it and see when it comes on, because you can't trust your temp gauge, for sure, can't trust that. But if you want to pull that out and put an ohmmeter or test light across it and put it into water on the stove, you know, when your wife isn't home, what are you doing to my stove? And just, you know, bring the thing up with watching a thermometer a candy thermometer or something or other, you can tell where it closes, you know.
Okay.
And of all the non-relayed parts of the car, I know people like to relay their headlights, and that makes sense. To save the switches, although with LED lights, if you got LED lights, it's no longer necessary. But if anything needs to be relayed, it's that fan switch. It's just a little tiny bimetal switch, and that carries the current to run 2 cooling fans that pull more current than anything else in the car except the starter motor. So those are powerful fans. So anyway.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So John, where can I source metal washers and a strong pin to service the clunk in my diff? I don't know where you can get the washers. I had a couple extras. I sold a pair to John Dykeis in Ann Arbor. Those are about the last ones that I had. You could call Paul Deershaw because they were used in all the banjo diffs and see if he's got a pile of copper ones. The hemispherical ones that go behind the pinion wheels, those you can buy, no problem there. We're talking about the flat washers that are sold. They're plastic, and I mean, help me out. They get banged up, and
John, I got mine while I was there at Bruce Feldman's place. He took care of the clunk in my rear end and in my differential too. But he got them from Denver. But then the flat ones, they were too thick. So we took them out, didn't put them in, but the clunk is gone.
Okay. Great.
So what is that? You said Paul?
Yeah, it's over in the chat section. It's
is that the crafts?
Sports car craftsman. Yeah, I just can't say enough good things about them. There's a place in Alabama, maybe Matthews Foreign Cars. There's a lot of places around. Bob and Gloria love Team Triumph. Why would you buy MG parts from a place with a Triumph in their name? I'm sorry, but they love this place in Ohio. The guy treats them right and everything. But man, for just instant service on used stuff, Paul Deershaw, Paul and Ian at Sports Car Craftsman. You just call them up and they'll tell you straight up if they got it. They're pleasant to deal with. It's just really nice.
Got another question for you if you have a chance.
Yeah, what's up?
I've got my midget's got a Triumph engine in it. It's got the FM numbered engine. Right. Is there an overdrive from a Spitfire that I could use
from a GT6? No, just a minute. Yes, from a yes, because I just did one. I rebuilt one in South Carolina last year on my East Coast tour. But I'm not taking this year because I'm going to get this midget done. And that must have been out of a Spitfire. So sure. So you got other stuff to consider. It's like the turns per mile on the Speedo and the length of the drive shaft. But that's probably it. You know. And of course, the Spitfire's got that cardboard tunnel that just comes out and makes it real easy, and the midget does not. And I know that gearbox will not fit inside a midget, but all you need is, a torch, and a cutoff wheel, and
exactly.
So
I could try to make it fit. Okay, very good. That's great.
And you got a relatively what year's your car?
It's a 75, 76. It's kind of got pieces of both cars, both years.
By 78 and 79, they had a 3.7 diff instead of the 3.9 diff. So hunt around and find a 3.7 diff. Of course, you need different speedo. But the 3.7 diff, you're going to get incrementally more miles per hour per RPM.
Okay. Great.
Okay. All right. So Pat G, who's been adding a lot to the conversation this week, John Esposito is the transmission guru, but good detergent oil has anti-foaming additives. So that being said, after John rebuilt my Overdrive, I put non-detergent oil in it. Yeah, if they tell you to follow the instructions, if they tell you to do that, just do it, you know? So, okay, let's see, Bradley Schwartz. Please explain what fittings I have to remove to replace the rubber seal strip on the bottom of the MGA windscreen. So there are 4 screws that run down the outside of the pillars that come up on the outside of the MGA. You take those screws out, don't mix them up, because if you get a screw that's too long and goes through and just touches the glass, you got to get a new windscreen. It's real embarrassing. So just take those out, and the windscreen just comes out. I mean, the windscreen comes out, and then you can slide that new seal on the bottom. So it's a relatively easy job to do. And Marty Bradley does have Team Triumph here in Warren, Ohio, in the chat section. Paul M, on an MGA wiper motor, has anyone found a way to secure the retainer clip for the bearing and bushing on the motor output shaft? Mine came loose and I could not get it to stay put. So are we talking on the wheel that runs the connecting rod that moves the rack? Is that the one we're talking about on this from Paul M? See if Paul M is still on board. We're down to 92 people because it's 9:01 p.m. So we've lost Paul. He posted his message late here, I guess. Oh, you're here.
No, I'm here.
Oh, great. Okay.
It's
This is
on the motor armature. Okay. The motor armature, you have one end that is just in a bushing, and you have another one that has the screw to drive the wiper motors, the drive end of that shaft.
And the clip you're talking about goes on the screw end of that? That abuts.
It holds the bushing into the casting. You know, there's that hot metal, white metal casting there.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that thing came loose, and apparently when they put it in, there's some punch marks in that pot metal that must have expanded enough to hold that spring clip.
Okay.
And
the
that
whole
doesn't
deal
hold
is
anymore.
that that's a spherical bushing. That's a
Yes.
spherical bushing. So you can,
Yeah,
doesn't-
self-aligning. Yep.
Okay. So you can call Team Triumph or Sports Car Craftsman and just get another motor, you know.
Oh, that would be the answer.
Well, it is an answer, you know, but sometimes it's like, I want to fix this myself, you know.
That's the way I am. Yep.
All right. So and you can't repeen it. You don't think you can take a punch and peen that because it's like a cup, right? It's got edges on it, and then the little wavy things come up to hold it. God, why would that slip out of there? You could use glue to hold in place. I mean, not glue, but Permatex. What am I talking about?
Loctite.
Loctite. Thank you. You could use Loctite. Maybe you could. I don't know if you can sweat solder on the outside of that to make it bigger, to push it in there. Maybe you could take a prick punch in the hole that it fits into and put 1,000 little pricks all around on the inside. So when you push that thing in, it grabs it more snugly. So there's a bunch of ways around that.
Okay, thank you.
So I rebuilt an MGA wiper motor for Andy Baedeker, who was the food editor for the Chicago Tribune. And this is 30 years ago. And I spent 2-3 hours on it and everything, got it all done. It looked beautiful, worked great. And I don't know, I charged him $150 or $175 or something. He liked to drop dead. Oh my God, I just had no idea it was going to be so much money. And so anyway, we worked out a deal, and I don't remember what I ended up charging him, not much. And he wrote a full page article that appeared in the Chicago Tribune about me and my business and everything. So I'm well familiar with MGA wiper motors for a number of reasons. So, yep. Good luck with that. Okay, Paul, to everybody, what LED bulbs work in an MGA dash lights? The ones from Moss burn your eyes out at 50 yards. I don't know. I know Little British Car Company. I know that's where he started selling LED bulbs. So, or you can just screw in some 987s again, you know, just the old factory bulbs. Maybe those would be okay. And I don't know how to dampen dampen down the brilliance on LEDs. I don't know a lot about those, but there must be some other ones out there that are available. So I don't know. I don't know. And I think we are here at the end of our chat section. So it's 9:05. We've had a nice chat. We've heard from in the very beginning from Lagos, Nigeria. That was interesting. We heard from Howie Brooks that I worked with in Yorkshire. He didn't live there when we worked there. He lived on Clitheroe Avenue in Hanwell, West 7, London, with his parents. His dad was in the Battle of Britain, I think. And anyway, and we've had Pat's had a lot of stuff to mention to us from California. And if anyone's going to be in California at GOF West, I'm not sure what day I'm going to be there yet. One guy's campaigning for me to come around on the day that he's rebuilding a T-type gearbox to show everybody how to rebuild a T-type gearbox. And I did say the date of our next chat section, or our next Zoom session, will be Columbus Day, October 9th. And I would ask everybody to be kind and go on to one of the two websites and find that PayPal button. And remember all the good advice that you get here in the community that we have. Thank you for your support very, very much. Really, I appreciate it. So that's about it for tonight. So we'll just sit here for 5 minutes. Everybody sort of cross talks and then we'll say goodbye.
Thank you, John.
Hey,
thanks, John. We'll catch you on the 9th.
Thanks, John. Great meeting.
Hey, Judd,
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Judd. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
We'll be going up to the mountains tomorrow, probably do about 200, 250 miles of taking the MGB. It needs to get exercised every now and then.
Hey, how nice. How nice. Mine's still sitting in the garage. I just talked to a guy today from Peoria, Illinois. He rebuilt a Bentley and just went to the Rolls-Royce Bentley event in Chicago and got best to show. He does really good work.
Wow.
And I said, here I am on the cusp of turning 75 years old, and I'm still learning stuff. You know, I'm still learning stuff. That's why you're all on here, right? You're all learning stuff too. So am I. I mean, if we're lucky, we're all still learning. And I said my most recent one was, if you got an MG, don't park on the right side of an F-350. You know, park on the left side so that he sees you when he climbs in it. So I got very, very few miles on my MGA this season. So I got to get this midget done before I get the MGA in my shop to work on that.
It's like an old person. You got to exercise or it'll just kind of rot away.
Yeah, for sure. So
I'm 76, so and we're still moving. So
hey, we're all look at the crowd here, you know, and we got a lot of septa and some octogenarians, you know, and maybe nonagenarians. I don't know.
Yeah, 78, looking good.
Hey, great. Hey.
All we see is gray hair and no hair.
Not much.
John, as they say, John, as they say, use it or lose it. And that applies to our bodies and our cars, right?
Yeah, I was at the gym this morning, and I told my trainer, I said, oh, I'm going on a color tour this weekend, and he was confused. He said, what's a color tour? I said, well, I'm not going to go there, but I said, well, it's what old people do when the leaves turn. You go out and you look at the pretty leaves. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So anyway,
John,
real pleasure to have everybody here. Richard, pleasure.
yeah, I've thought about your story over the last couple of weeks several times. I've got a F-150 every time I pull out of a parking place.
Look to your right. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, John, is there any way can you calibrate an MGB speedometer? I'm losing about 1.6 miles for every 100. And
I don't think you can get any closer than that. I don't think you can, but if you can send it, I don't think you can get any closer than 1%. What are you off? 1.5%?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got a 1280 Speedo. And the problem is the tires aren't the same size as the original tires. So
I'm real fanatical about that. When I put the new tires on, they're 0.2 of an inch shorter than what comes on their stock. So
then maybe that's where the problem was. But anyway, so you push the car through a measured distance, right? And the farther you push it, the more accurate it's going to be. So we used to when we did this with Neisinger, because they used to do all of our Speedos, and they don't do it anymore. Now it's West Valley Instruments. You got to deal with Morris on the West Coast on that. But you push the car through a measured distance and count the number of times that the Speedo cable turns. So we put a flag on the Speedo cable with a piece of masking tape and have a degree wheel on there. So it took 4 people to do this, 2 to push the car, 1 to steer, and 1 to count. And we had a pre-marked places on the pavement. So you'd push it up to the starting point, rotate the wheel so you're 0 degrees, and then start pushing it. We push it through. I was 110 feet. That's 2/100ths of a mile, or something like that. And the Speedo cable would turn, and you just count how many times it turned, and then you get 18 turns and 250 degrees. Then you push it back, and we do it 3 times just to make sure we're in the ballpark, and then average those 3 figures and provide that information to the rebuilder. And then, because that's your car, that's your differential and your tires and your wheels and everything. And then he would make the odometer correct. So it's your odometer that's wrong, right? So
yeah, and actually the odd thing is you would think the speedometer would be wrong in that direction, but my speedometer, well, at 68 on my speedometer, I'm actually doing 73. So it's just the opposite. And then the time in Montana when I topped 115 actually was over 120 then, which that's kind of a scary thing in a little car like that.
It's going pretty fast.
Yeah, so I did that once.
I use the speedometer app on my phone.
That's how we get the accurate
to check mine, and I did that with my MGA because I put a 4 or a 3.9 diff in my MGA, and then got the speedometer correct. I don't know whether the odometer, I don't know how close the odo is, but the speedo is like spot on, absolutely spot on.
So I
No.
think, rather than go through all that, I think I'll just, accept 1.6. That's the easiest thing to do. And I know how fast I'm going now because of using that app. I always
Yeah.
ask, okay, how fast am I going now? It's 73. Okay, good. You know, and keeps me from getting.
Or you can get out your old Dymo label maker.
Yeah.
Stick things on the speedo, you know, the correction. Yeah.
You know what's interesting on the tech when you it's 21.9 or actually 22 miles per hour for every 10,000, and my tech is right on the money. What I'm the speed I'm supposed to go at 3,000, that's the speed that I'm doing. So I could even drive by the tech.
So the tachometer is electronic, you know, but the speedo and the odo, which are two separate units powered by the same cable, that's all just mechanical, springs and weights and magnets and stuff. So
I got a new speedometer cable I carry with me. I might just put that on.
that's not it. That's not it.
Yeah, because my needle doesn't go back and forth or anything.
No, it's the speedo itself.
Yeah, well, I'll just live with it. Actually, I got more than 518 on it, but that's okay.
So for Doug Clark, we always have our, what number did you get tonight, Doug? Were you counting?
Yeah, I sent you a note, I think on the chat, 155.
Okay, all right.
I
Go
saw
ahead.
156. That's the closest we've been to each other in a while.
Okay, all right, but I didn't bring my hat. I didn't bring a hat to challenge Doug. We usually have a hat off, you know, to see who's got the coolest
Well,
hat.
I'll save my hat for next time, John. I have one here, but I don't want to shame you. So we'll save it for next time.
All right, okay, all right. Okay, well, anyway, thank you, ladies, gentlemen, very much.
Thanks,
And
Matt.
we'll look forward to seeing everybody next time. And thank you very much for being on, and hope you had a good time, and tell your friends, and get some more people on next time. I don't know what we'll talk about next time. So always something, there's always something to talk about. So maybe we'll talk to some electrical thing.
I don't know if you mentioned, but the tool for adjusting Stromberg carburetors.
Yeah,
well, that's invaluable. They're like $11 at Moss, 11.5 bucks. But otherwise, if you try to use an Allen wrench, it'll twist the. So it's just.
You got to, if you got a Stromberg, you must have the Stromberg tool. Yes.
We worked on somebody's car with that. Yeah.
I failed to say that today, but or else the air cleaner comes off and your thumb's against the piston to keep, you know, to keep it from rotating, you know, but yeah, I can't, where's that box? I had a box. I was going to show this world's smallest O-ring, but I don't know what I did with that. Oh, here it is.
Oh, no.
Holy cow.
So that's next to my index. And that's probably not the world's smallest O-ring. It is the smallest O-ring in the MG though. That's a tiny, tiny little O-ring.
Wow.
Don't sneeze.
That's why I've got it on a piece of tape, you know. So, all right. Thank you very kindly. We'll look forward to seeing everybody on Columbus Day.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Everybody have a good evening.
Thank you, John. Good night.
Thank you.
Good
See ya.
night.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.